If you want more consistency in your life and you're also struggling to create that consistency and you feel like blocks keep coming up and things keep happening that are making it really hard for you to be consistent in, for example, the gym or creating content or whatever it might be, right? If you're struggling to create that consistency, this video is literally going to explain to you and show you the science behind consistency and how you can literally build the consistency yourself, no matter what else is going on in your life. I, for a very long time, especially when I was like a professional athlete, I didn't think about the word consistency ever really. All I thought was it took a huge amount of willpower and a huge amount of motivation to achieve the things I wanted. And I didn't look at the word consistency or feel like I had to be consistent because I thought willpower and motivation was the thing that really, really mattered. And then the interesting thing was when, I lost that athletic profession and all of a sudden I was trying to be consistent in things that I wasn't truly passionate about. So the motivation, the natural motivation was lowered because I wasn't naturally passionate about it. And I felt like my willpower just wasn't there anymore. My strength, my energy to be consistent in whatever it was that I was trying to be consistent in at that point in time, I really struggled. And I felt like a bit of a failure. I felt like, lazy, until I realized that it's actually not about motivation. It's got nothing to do with willpower, and it's actually got everything to do with rewiring your brain for consistency. And there's an actual science behind it. Now, I actually shared the science of this in a group live coaching session. So if I'm looking at my laptop, it's because I actually created a presentation around it. But to start off with, I want to ingrain this into your brain. Most people believe they need motivation to stay on track. I definitely believe that too. But science tells us otherwise. Long-term success is not about motivation. It is about building autonomic habits through neuroplasticity, okay? And neuroplasticity, we'll get into more in a second, but basically it is the idea that your brain can rewire itself, okay? What I'm going to show you today is how to train your brain for consistency in whatever it is that you're trying to be consistent in, so that those tasks and those habits become effortless, which is a dream for all of us. If we didn't have to put so much effort into doing habits or doing tasks, and it was like this effortless thing, then we'd save so much more energy, have lowered stress, etc. I just had to take out my retainer. I have like a retainer in my mouth and it makes me lisp a lot. It makes it really difficult for me to talk properly. So yeah, anyway, moving on. The science around brain and habit formation, okay? So how your mind shapes your actions. Essentially, you have two parts of your brain. One is your habit center, which is your basal ganglia, which is deep inside of your brain. And then the other part is your prefrontal cortex, which is on the front outer part of your brain, which is your decision-making center, okay? And this is why willpower is a limited resource. It is a limited resource because you are relying on your prefrontal cortex for willpower. You are relying on it for decision making, and it gets tired. It's not an endless battery of energy, and what is naturally ingrained into our brain that requires a lot less energy are the habit center of our brain, which is your basal ganglia. So basically, every time you consciously decide what to eat, what to work out, when to go to bed, what kind of content you should create, any sort of decision you have to make, you are using your prefrontal cortex. And as I said, that is a battery that isn't never ending. It gets more tired the more that you use it. Essentially, the more decisions you make in a day, the harder it becomes to make good decisions. So if you are someone who makes a lot of decisions throughout their day, and by the end of the day, you feel quite tired and sometimes you default into unhealthy habits, because you just feel so tired, that's probably because you're using your prefrontal cortex, your PFC, too much during the day. The good thing about this, and a huge takeaway from this video, is the fact that your basal ganglia, which is your habit center, is automatic, okay? Think about like when you turn on a car that's automatic, you don't have to shift it into all these different like gears or whatever. By the way, I have an automatic car. I'm a really bad driver. I shouldn't label myself as that, but you know, I do not believe at this point in time that I'm a great driver. So I have driven manual, but I'm not very good at it, and I always stall the car. So anyway, long story short, your basal ganglia is like an automatic car, okay? It's automatic. You don't have to put in all this energy for it to work, and it's basically living on autopilot, okay? So it is responsible for repetitive behaviors. For example, driving home on like autopilot, you don't have to think about where you turn if you've like driven the same way home from work every single day. Brushing your teeth, for example, you don't think about that, you just do it. Or maybe you have a habit of reaching for snacks whenever you're watching TV. That is an automatic behavior, okay? So unlike your PFC, your basal ganglia, the thing that's deeper in your brain, it doesn't get nearly as tired because it runs off efficiency. It runs off the idea that you don't have to make decisions. So once an action essentially becomes a habit, it moves from the prefrontal cortex, from the decision-making area part of your brain, to your basal ganglia. And this is such a good thing to understand, because if you want a habit or a task to become automatic, meaning you do it every day, you don't have to think about it, and it is effortless for you to do, understand that the more you create it as a habit, the more it's actually going to move literally from your prefrontal cortex into your basal ganglia, and therefore be effortless, which is what we want. We all want our lives to be as easy as possible, and we want to, you know, relieve and dismiss as much decision making as we can, so that, you know, we have more energy and we don't feel so fatigued every day. Now, this is the thing that intrigued me the most, which is around willpower and why it is a limited resource. So again, for years I thought, oh, just be motivated, all this willpower, be really successful. And I lived like that for such a long time. And then when I lost that career, I was like, oh my God, like there is no willpower in me. I just feel so tired, etc., etc. And basically willpower is a limited resource, okay? Kind of like coal. It's a limited resource. It runs out. Willpower is like a battery. You start the day with a certain amount, but every decision you make drains your willpower. Studies literally show that by the end of the day, people are more likely to give in to cravings, skip workouts, or make poor decisions simply because their prefrontal cortex, their PFC, is exhausted. Now, successful people don't rely on willpower. They rely on habits. Instead of making a conscious decision every time, they create automatic systems like meal planning, workout schedules, morning routines, whatever it is, so that healthy actions happen without thinking, which is the key here. This is why people talk about create better habits, create better habits. It's all about your habits. You know the book, what is it? Atomic Habits. It's all about habit formation. And once that thing is a literal habit, it is in your basal ganglia. There is no effort you have to put in, you just do it. Like waking up and brushing your teeth. Hopefully you just do that and you know, you don't need to think about it. Now, I don't want to get too into this because I don't want it to confuse any of you, but essentially neuroplasticity is the science of rewiring your brain, okay? And we can rewire our brain for success, meaning we can make habits and we can make these habits go into our basal ganglia, essentially, so that we don't need to think about performing the habit and we just do it, which is great. And how this happens is based off a thing called Hebb's law. Now stay with me because I'm going to make this very simple to understand. Neurons that fire together, wire together. In our brain, we have neurons, okay, which are basically a specific type of cell that sends messages for us to do stuff or think about things or create a certain emotion, okay? Neurons that fire together, wire together. So Hebb's law basically explains how repeating small actions creates stronger neural pathways, making behaviors feel natural. Okay, I like the idea or the analogy of, you know, when you like go walking in like a forest or something per se, and let's just say you go down some track that isn't even a track, like you just go down it yourself. There's no dirt, you're stepping on leaves and grass and everything, maybe some like twigs and stuff, and it's not actually a pathway. But let's just say, oh, I really liked that walk, and so next time you go down it, and next time you go down it, and next time you go down it, and because you keep going down the same pathway, you get rid of the grass, you get rid of the twigs, and it becomes this dirt pathway, right? That is essentially the same idea as how repeating small actions creates a stronger neural pathway. And when you create this pathway to be stronger and stronger and stronger, guess what's happening? It's going into your basal ganglia, which is where that behavior or action becomes effortless. I don't want to get too much into the science today because I want to keep this really simplistic, but essentially in our brain, we have an action potential that occurs between two nerve cells, okay? Say this is one, not nerve cell, neuron, sorry. Let's say this is one neuron and this is the other neuron, right? And they can join together by a thing where my thumbs are pointing. That thing there where they like join is scientifically called a synapse. Now, one cell is a sending cell. Let's say this one's a sending. It's going to send a signal. And then this one is the receiving cell where it receives the information. Now imagine you decide to wake up every day and go for a walk. Not only is this going to fire more and more, go for a walk, go for a walk, go for a walk, your brain is going, the other neuron, is going to receive that and be like, yep, let's go for a walk, let's go for a walk. And so the join becomes closer and closer and it becomes stronger and stronger, and before you know it, you don't think about let's go for a walk, it's we're going for a walk now, right? So what we have to understand here is that your brain isn't fixed. It's constantly adapting, constantly learning, and it can change a lot based on what you repeatedly do. So the ability to rewire itself and rewire your brain is called neuroplasticity, and it's the key to making healthy habits feel natural instead of forced, okay? So basically, when we understand this, all we really need to understand is how to use this to our advantage. Number one, start with small and repeated daily actions, okay? Because the small actions done consistently rewire your brain. Number two is to attach new habits to existing ones. Let's say you have the habit of making a coffee every single morning, and maybe you want to have the habit of having water before you have your coffee because caffeine and coffee dehydrates your body. Instead, whilst you make the coffee and it's in the coffee machine, because that's already a habit, you align it with a new habit of drinking a glass of water whilst the coffee machine is making its coffee. Number three is make habits enjoyable, okay? So your brain strengthens the pathway when there's an element of reward, okay? For example, people who want to be more active and they know they should walk more often, align walking with something you enjoy. Maybe that's a particular type of music, maybe it's a podcast, or maybe it's going for a walk with a friend, or maybe it's going for a walk with a dog, and these are all things that you really enjoy. So when you align a specific habit with reward, then you're more inclined to do it, right? And number 4 is to be patient. Studies literally show that it takes about 66 days for a new habit to become automatic, okay? So the more you repeat it, the easier it gets. As long as you wake up every day and whenever you're doing these new habits and you remind yourself, the more I do it, the easier it gets. The more I do it, the easier it gets. Then you are so much more likely to do it for a long enough time period that it really does become an effortless habit. So the final takeaway here is that your brain resists effort because it wants to conserve energy. Remember our prefrontal cortex, the thing in the front of our brain, it gets tired from making all of these decisions, okay? So our brain naturally wants to conserve energy and therefore it resists naturally putting in effort, which is why when you try to do a new habit or you try and do a new task, your brain will often naturally resist doing that action or doing that task because it wants to conserve energy. But also understand that the more you avoid it, the harder starting becomes, okay? The more you avoid doing that task, the harder it becomes to start doing that task and create that habit. So the change really starts with you. Yes, understanding the science here, but also understanding that if I want to make these actions and these tasks as effortless as possible and conserve more energy, take action now. Stop procrastinating, because procrastination is just going to make it harder for you to start and harder for you to change your life in the way that you want to change it. Now, the last thing I want to finish with is the motivation myth, okay? Which is why relying on willpower really is a mistake, and it's a mistake I made quite a long time ago. So basically, there is the 40% rule. Research literally shows 40% of daily actions are habitual, not conscious decisions, which means 40% of the things you do are coming from your basal ganglia. 40%. That's a lot, right? So the idea here is that if you can train your brain to crave healthy habits instead of relying on feeling motivated, and you create that, then you're actually going to notice change long term. Most people really do think they need more motivation to build better habits. I heard it for years being an online health and fitness coach. I just need more motivation. I just need more motivation. Maybe you watch a video on Instagram and you're like, oh my God, that's my motivation for today. But like, the motivation comes and goes, firstly. Secondly, that's an external sense of motivation. You're relying on someone's video. And thirdly, the truth is that motivation is unreliable. It fluctuates based on your mood, your energy levels, stress, and even the weather sometimes. I remember when I used to live in Germany when it was like freezing cold, my motivation to get out of bed was like zero. It was, excuse my language, but it was freezing. Instead of relying on motivation, successful people rely on habits and systems. What about the system of transferring the habits from your prefrontal cortex into your basal ganglia? Because once a behavior becomes automatic, meaning the behavior is in your basal ganglia, you no longer need to be motivated to do it. Imagine doing all these things that you know you should do, but not needing the motivation to do them. How amazing would that be? Well, let me tell you right now, it is very much so possible for you to live like that and you to be like that. But it does start with the consciousness of, firstly, how this all works, and secondly, the consciousness to take the task, take the action where it does require effort, where it is new for you, but in doing so, reminding yourself, the more I do this, the more it's going to become a habit, and the more I'm going to move it to my basal ganglia, and therefore the less effort I'll have to put in over time. And then you will reap the reward, and you will reap the benefit of, living a more successful life and having a lot more energy and not using your prefrontal cortex nearly as much. Now, I want to finish off with a trick for you all, which is the idea around procrastination and dopamine, because I know a lot of you are probably sitting here being like, I procrastinate all the time. Remember, procrastination is because your brain resists putting in effort. But there's also this chemical called dopamine, which is released when you get over the procrastination and you do what you know you should be doing. I use the 3-minute trick, and it's so helpful. Basically, you tell yourself you'll do the task or the action for 3 minutes. I do it all the time when I have to clean the house. Cleaning the whole house seems extremely tiring. It's going to take up a lot of time. When I tell myself I'm just going to do it for 3 minutes, naturally it reduces the mental resistance, because it's like, well, it's not a huge task. I'm only going to do it for 3 minutes. And then the good thing is, once you do it for 3 minutes, it increases a follow through, meaning like once you do it for 3 minutes, you are so much more likely to fulfill the task. And even if you don't fulfill the entire task, at least you did it for 3 minutes. At least you did something rather than nothing, and you won't feel guilty for procrastinating. So I want to end with that trick for you all. The 3-minute rule. It has actually changed my life in so many ways. It's crazy, and I know it will change your life and help you in so many ways as well. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, definitely drop a subscription and a follow to the channel, because there's always new videos coming out like this, and it does help support me in order to support you with more guidance around all things self-development, changing your life for the better, changing you for the better, and overall living in your most authentic sense of self, and therefore attracting naturally the things that you want in your life rather than chasing them, which just creates resistance. If you think anyone else in your life would benefit from this video and they are a bit of a procrastinator, or they want more consistency in their life, but they keep coming up to all of these blocks, then definitely feel welcome to share it with them, because I know it would help them as well. That's it for today, guys. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.